Shirley by Charlotte Bronte, the continuation of Chapter 9, Briarmains. But mind, Rose, he's not so much your friend as he is mine. He is my particular acquaintance, remember that. And she held up her hand, her small hand, with an admonitory gesture. Rose was quite accustomed to be admonished by that small hand. Her will daily bent itself to that of the impetuous little Jessie. She was guided, overruled by Jessie in 1,000 things. On all occasions of show and pleasure, Jessie took the lead, and Rose fell quietly into the background. Whereas, when the disagreeables of life, its works and privations, were in question, Rose instinctively took upon her, in addition to her own share, what she could of her sisters. Jessie had already settled it in her mind that she, when she was old enough, was to be married. Rose, she decided, must be an old maid, to live with her, look after her children, keep her house. This state of things is not uncommon between two sisters, where one is plain and the other pretty. But in this case, if there was a difference in external appearance, Rose had the advantage. Her face was more regular featured than that of the piquant little Jessie. Jessie, however, was destined to possess, along with sprightly intelligence and vivacious feeling, the gift of fascination, the power of charm, when, where, and whom she would. Rose was to have a fine, generous soul, a noble intellect profoundly cultivated, a heart as true as steel, but the manner to attract was not to be hers. Now, Rose, tell me the name of this lady who denied that I was sentimental, urged Mr. Moore. Rose had no idea of tantalization, or she would have held him a while in doubt. She answered briefly, I can't. I don't know her name. Describe her to me. What was she like? Where did you see her? When Jessie and I went to spend the day at Windbury with Kate and Susan Pearson, who had just come home from school, there was a party at Mrs. Pearson's, and some grown-up ladies were sitting in a corner of the drawing-room talking about you. Did you know none of them? Hannah and Harriet and Dora and Mrs. Sykes. Good. Were they abusing me, Rosie? Some of them were. They called you a misanthrope. I remember the word. I looked for it in the dictionary when I came home. It means a man-hater. What besides? Hannah Sykes said you were a solemn puppy. Better, cried Mr. Yorke, laughing. Oh, excellent, Hannah. That's the one with the red hair, a fine girl, but half-witted. She was wit enough for me, it appears, said Moore. A solemn puppy indeed. Well, Rose, go on. Miss Pearson said she believed there was a good deal of affection about you, and that your dark hair and pale face, to her you looked like some sort of sentimental noodle. Again Mr. Yorke laughed. Mrs. Yorke even joined in this time. You see in what esteem your ass came into the country, old as she is. And who contradicted her, Rosie? Inquired Moore. A lady whom I don't know, because she never visits here, though I see her every Sunday at church. She sits in the pew near the pulpit. I generally look at her instead of looking at my prayer book, for she is like a picture in our dining room, that woman with the dove in her hand. At least she has eyes like it, and a nose too. A straight nose that makes all her face look somehow what I call clear. And you don't know her? Exclaimed Jessie in a tone of exceeding surprise. That's so like Rose. Mr. Moore, I often wonder in what sort of a world my sister lives. I am sure she does not live all her time in this. One is continually finding out that she is quite ignorant of some little matter which everybody else knows. To think of her going solemnly to church every Sunday and looking all service time at one particular person, and never so much as asking that person's name. She means Caroline Helstone, the rector's niece. I remember all about it. Miss Helstone is quite angry with Anne Pearson. She said Robert Moore is neither affected nor sentimental. You mistake his character utterly, or rather not one of you here knows anything about it. Now, shall I tell you what she is like? I can tell what people are like and how they are dressed better than Rose can. Let us hear. She is nice, she is fair. She has a pretty white, slender throat. She has long curls, not stiff ones. They hang loose and soft. Their colour is brown but not dark. She speaks quietly with a clear tone. She never makes a bustle in moving. She often wears a grey silk dress. She is neat all over. Her gowns and her shoes and her gloves always fit her. She is what I call a lady. And when I'm as tall as she is, I mean to be like her. Shall I suit you if I am? Will you marry me? Will you really marry me? Moore stroked Jessie's hair. For a minute he seemed as if he would draw her nearer to him, but instead he put her a little further off. Farther off. Oh, you won't have me. You push me away. Why, Jessie, you care nothing about me. You never come to see me now at the Hollow. Because you don't ask me. Hereupon, Mr. Moore gave both the little girls an invitation to pay him a visit next day, promising that, as he was going to Stilbroe in the morning, he would buy them each a present. Of what nature he would not then declare, but they must come and see. Jessie was about to reply when one of the boys unexpectedly broke in. I know that Miss Helstone you have all been palavering about. She's an ugly girl. I hate her. I hate all womanites. I wonder what they were made for. Martin, said his father, for Martin it was. The lad only answered by turning his cynical young face, half arch, half truculent, toward the paternal chair. Martin, my lad, thou art a swaggering whelp now. Thou wilt some day be an outrageous puppy. But stick to those sentiments of thine. See, I'll write down the words now in my pocket-book. The senior took out a morocco-covered book and deliberately wrote therein, 10 years hence, Martin, if thou and I be both alive at that day, I'll remind thee of that speech. I'll say the same then. I mean always to hate women. They're such dolls. They do nothing but dress themselves finely and go swimming about to be admired. I'll never marry. I'll be a bachelor. Stick to it. Hester, addressing his wife. Hester, addressing his wife. I was like him when I was his age. A regular misogynist. And behold, by the time I was 23 and 20, being then a tourist in France and Italy and the Lord knows where, I curled my hair every night before I went to bed and wore a ring in my ear and would have worn one in my nose if it had been the fashion, and all that I might make myself pleasing, charming to the ladies. Martin will do that. Will I? Never. I've more sense. What a guy you were, father. As to dressing, I make this vow. I'll never dress more finely than as you see me at present, Mr. Moore. I'm clad in blue cloth from top to toe, and they laugh at me and call me sailor at the grammar school. I laugh louder at them, and they say they are all magpies and say they are all magpies and parrots, with their coats one colour and their waistcoats another and their trousers a third. I'll always wear blue cloth, nothing but blue cloth. It is beneath a human's dignity to dress himself in party-coloured garments. 10 years hence, Martin, no tailor's shop will have choice of colours varied enough for thy exacting taste, no perfumer's stores essences exquisite enough for thy fastidious senses. Martin looked disdain, but vouchsafed to no further reply. Meantime, Mark, who for some minutes had been rummaging amongst a pile of books on a side table, took the word. He spoke in a peculiarly slow, quiet voice, and with an expression of still irony in his face not easy to describe. Mr. Moore, said he, you think perhaps it was a compliment on Miss Caroline Helstone's part to say you were not sentimental? I thought you appeared confused when my sisters told you the words, as if you felt flattered. You turned red, just like a certain vain little lad at our school who always thinks proper to blush when he gets a rise in the class. For your benefit, Mr. Moore, I've been looking up the word sentimental in the dictionary, and I find it to mean tinctured with sentiment. On examining further, sentiment is explained to be thought, idea, notion. A sentimental man, then, is one who has thoughts, ideas, notions. An unsentimental man is one destined of thought, idea, and or notion. And Mark stopped. He did not smile. He did not look round for admiration. He had said his say and was silent. "Ma foi, mon ami," observed Mr. Moore to York, "ce sont vraiment des enfants terribles qu'est le vôtre." Rose, who had been listening attentively to Mark's speech, replied to him. "There are different kinds of thoughts, ideas, and notions," said she, "good and bad. Sentimental must refer to the bad, or Miss Helstone must have taken it in that sense, for she is not blaming Mr. Moore. She was defending him." "That's my little advocate," said Moore, taking Rose's hand. "She was defending him," repeated Rose, "as I should have done had I been in her place, for the other ladies seemed to speak spitefully." "Ladies always do speak spitefully," observed Martin. "It is the nature of womanites to be spiteful." Matthew now, for the first time, opened his lips. "What a fool Martin is, to be always gabbling about what he does not understand." "It is my privilege as a free man to gabble on whatever subject I like," responded Martin. "You use it, or rather abuse it, to such an extent," rejoined the elder brother, "that you prove you ought to have been a slave." A slave, that to a York and from a York. This fellow," he added, standing up at the table, pointing across it. Sorry, my cat is trying to get in on the recording. I've just dropped my microphone, my apologies. Matthew, or use it, or rather abuse it, to such an extent, rejoined the elder brother, that you prove you ought to have been a slave, that to a York, and from a York. This fellow," he added, standing up at the table and pointing across to Matthew, "this fellow forgets that every cottier in Briarfield knows that all born of our house have that arched instep under which water can flow, proof that there has not been a slave of the blood for 300 years. Mountebank, said Matthew. Cat. Stop it. Sorry about that. She's now attacking me. Right, sorry about this. Lads, be silent, exclaimed Mr. York. Martin, you are a mischief maker. There would have been no disturbance but for you. Cat, come on. Indeed, is that correct? Did I begin, or did Matthew? Had I spoken to him when he accused me of gabbling like a fool? A presumptuous fool, repeated Matthew. Here Mrs. York commenced rocking herself, rather a portentous movement with her, as it was occasionally followed, especially when Matthew was worsted in a conflict by a fit of hysterics. I don't see why I should bear insolence from Matthew York, or what right he has to use bad language to me, observed Martin. He has no right, my lad, but forgive your brother until 70 and 7 times, said Mr. York soothingly. Always alike, and theory and practice always adverse, murmured Martin as he turned to leave the room. Where art thou going, my son? Asked the father. Somewhere where I shall be safe from insult, if in this house I can find any such place. Martin laughed very insolently. Martin threw a strange look at him and trembled through all his slight lad's frame, but he restrained himself. I suppose there is no objection in my withdrawing? He inquired. No, go, my lad, but remember not to bear malice. Martin went, and Matthew sent another insolent laugh after him. Rose, lifting her fair head from Moore's shoulder, against which for a moment it had been resting, said, as she directed a steady gaze to Matthew, Martin is grieved, and you are glad, but I would rather be Martin than you. I dislike your nature. Here, Mr. Moore, by way of averting or at least escaping a scene which a sob from Mrs. York warned him was likely to come on, rose and putting Jessie off his knees, he kissed her and rose. My cats are now fighting. Stop it. I wish you could see this. Right, sorry, my apologies. Reminding him at the same time to be sure and come to the Hollow in good time tomorrow afternoon. Then, having taken leave of his hostess, he said to Mr. York, "May I speak a word with you?" and was followed by him from the room. Their brief conference took place in the hall. "Have you employment for a good workman?" asked Moore. "A nonsense question in these times, when you know that every master has many good workmen to whom he cannot give full employment. You must oblige me by taking on this man, if possible." "My lad, I can take on no more hands to oblige all England." "It does not signify. I must find him a place somewhere." "Who is he?" "Mr. William Farren." "William Farren. I know William. A right down honest man is William." "He has been out of work 3 months. He has a large family. We are sure they cannot live without wages. He was one of a deputation of cloth dressers who came to me this morning to complain and threaten. William did not threaten. He only asked me to give him rather more time to make my changes more slowly. You know I cannot do that. Straitened on all sides as I am, I have nothing for it but to push on through it, though it would be idle to palaver long with them. I sent them away after arresting a rascal amongst them, whom I hope to transport, a fellow who preaches at the chapel yonder sometimes." "Not Moses Barraclough?" "Yes." "Ah, you've arrested him. Good. Then out of a scoundrel you're going to make a martyr. You've done a wise thing." "I've done a right thing. Well, the short and the long of it is I'm determined to get Farren a place, and I reckon on you to give him one." "This is cool, however," exclaimed Mr. York. "What right have you to reckon on me to provide for your dismissed workmen? What do I know about your Farrens and your Williams? I've heard he's an honest man, but am I to support all the honest men in Yorkshire? You may say that would be no great charge to undertake, but great or little, I'll none of it." "Come, Mr. York, what can you find for him to do?" "I find? You'll make me lose language I'm not accustomed to use. I wish you would go home. Here is the door. Set off." Moore sat down on one side of the hall chairs. "You can't give him work in your mill?" "Good. But you have land. Find him some occupation on your land, Mr. York." "Bob, I thought you cared nothing about our Lords de Payson. I don't understand this change." "I do. The fellow spoke to me nothing but truth and sense. I answered him just as roughly as I did the rest, who jabbered mere gibberish. I couldn't make distinctions here and then. His appearance told what he had gone through lately clearer than his words, but where is the use of explaining? Let him have work." "Let him have it yourself. If you are so very in earnest, strain a point." "If there is a point left in my affairs to strain, I would strain it till it cracked again. But I received letters this morning which show me pretty clearly where I stand, and it is not far off the end of the plank. My foreign market, at any rate, is gorged. If there is no change, if there dawns no prospect of peace, if the orders in council are not as least suspended as to open our way in the west, I do not know where I am to turn. I see no more light if I was sealed in a rock, so that for me to pretend to offer a man a livelihood would be to do a dishonest thing. Come, come, let us take a turn in the front. It is a starlight night," said Mr. York. They passed out, closing the front door after them, and side by side paced the frost-white pavement to and fro. "Settle about Farren at once," urged Mr. Moore. "You have large fruit gardens at York Mills. He is a good gardener." give him work there. Well, so be it. I'll send for him tomorrow and we'll see. And now, my lad, you're concerned about the condition of your affairs. Yes, a second failure which I may delay, but which at this moment I see no way finally to avert, would blight the name of Moore completely. And you are aware I had fine intentions of paying off every debt and re-establishing the old firm on its former basis. You want capital, that's all you'll want? Yes, but you might as well say that breath is all a dead man wants to live. Yes, but you might as well say that breath is all a dead man wants to live. I know capital is not to be had for the asking. And if you were a married man and had a family like me, I should think your case pretty nigh desperate. But the young and unencumbered have chances peculiar to them. I hear gossip now then about your being on the eve of marriage with this miss and that, but I suppose it is none of it true. You may well suppose that. I think I am not in a position to be dreaming of marriage. Marriage, I cannot bear the word. It sounds so silly and utopian. I have settled it decidedly that marriage and love are superfluities, intended only for the rich who live at ease and have no need to take thought for the morrow, or desperations, the last and reckless joy of the deeply wretched who never hope to rise out of the slough of their utter poverty. I should think not. So if I were circumstanced as you are, I should think I would very likely get a wife and a few thousands who would suit both me and my affairs. I wonder where. Would you try if you had a chance? I don't know. In short, it depends on many things. Would you take an old woman? I'd rather break stones on the road. So would I. Would you take an ugly one? Bah, I hate ugliness and delight in beauty. My eyes and heart, York, take pleasure in a sweet young fair face, as they are repelled by a grim, rugged, meagre one. Soft, delicate lines and hues, please. Harsh ones prejudice me. I won't have an ugly wife. Not if she were rich. Not if she were dressed in gems. I could not love. I could not fancy. I could not endure her. My taste must have satisfaction, or disgust would break out in despotism, or worse, freeze in utter iciness. What, Bob, if you married an honest, good-natured and wealthy lass, though a little hard-favoured, couldn't you put up with the high cheekbones, the rather wide mouth and reddish hair? I'll never try, I tell you. Grace, at least, I will have, and youth and symmetry, yes, and what I call beauty. And poverty and a nursery full of bairns you can neither clothe nor feed, and very soon an anxious, faded mother than bankruptcy discredit. A lifelong struggle. Let me alone, York. If you are romantic, Robert, and especially if you are already in love, it is of no use talking. I'm not romantic. I am stripped of romance, as bare as the white tenters in that field are of cloth. Always use such figures of speech, lad, I can understand them, and there is no love affair to disturb your judgment. I thought I had said enough on that subject before. Love for me? Stuff. Well then, if you are sound both in heart and head, there is no reason why you should not profit by a good chance if it offers. Therefore, wait and see. You are quite... My cat, stop it. You are quite oracular, York. I think I am a bit i' that line. I promise ye naught, and I advise ye naught, but I bid ye keep your heart up and be guided by circumstances. My namesake, the physician's almanac, could not speak more guardedly. In the meantime, I care nought about ye, Robert Moore. Ye are nothing akin to me or mine, and whether ye lose or find a fortune, it makes no difference to me. Go home now. It is stricken 10. Miss Hortense will be wondering where ye are. God, these